vulnerable threshold between birth and baptism exists a phenomenon representing primal parental fear manifested. The changeling, a fairy child substituted for a stolen human infant through a supernatural exchange. Its unnatural development patterns and insatiable resource consumption gradually reveal its inhuman nature, while the original child serves an unknown purpose within the fairy realm. Beyond mortal recovery attempts. Unlike supernatural entities targeting adults capable of resistance, changelings represent predation focused specifically on society's most vulnerable members, newborn infants. Their limited developmental markers and inability to communicate create the perfect substitution opportunity. The replacement often remains undetected through the critical initial period when recovery might still be possible. This specialized targeting suggests an evolutionary adaptation specifically exploiting human reproductive vulnerability, creating a perfect parasitic strategy inserted precisely at the species' continuation point. Traditional accounts describe substitution occurring during specific vulnerability windows, particularly before the completion of the Christian baptism ritual, during a momentary lapse in parental attention, or when specific protective measures, including iron placement and verbal blessings, are neglected. The exchange reportedly occurs with supernatural speed, the legitimate human child vanishing without a trace, while the substitute appears in the identical position, often wearing the same clothing and assuming the same position, creating a seamless transition designed to prevent immediate detection. In initial appearance, changelings present perfect mimicry rather than obvious monstrosity. Witnesses describe the infant as seemingly identical to the stolen child immediately following the substitution, with no discernible differences observable even to the closest family members. This perfect replication extends beyond mere physical appearance to include behavioral patterns, cry signature, and even specific comfort preferences, suggesting either extensive pre-substitution observation or, more disturbingly, the ability to extract this information directly from the stolen child's consciousness during the exchange process. What betrays inhuman nature is developmental divergence occurring gradually following substitution. Subtle differences progressively emerging through patterns impossible to recognize immediately, yet becoming increasingly apparent through extended observation. Physical development demonstrates distinctive abnormalities, particularly disproportionate head size relative to body, unusual limb configuration, often featuring excessive joint flexibility, and most consistently, distinctive facial features including unusually deep-set eyes, prematurely developed teeth often described as too numerous or incorrectly positioned, and skin texture described as waxy or aged, despite infant chronological age. Most significant is the reported behavioral divergence from normal infant development, particularly regarding consumption patterns, vocalization characteristics, and social engagement. Feeding behavior demonstrates insatiability regardless of quantity provided, yet without corresponding growth or weight gain expected from such intake, creating impression of resource consumption without biological utilization. Vocalization develops abnormal characteristics, either complete absence despite physical capability, or conversely, sounds demonstrating complexity impossible for developmental stage, sometimes including words or phrases beyond infant linguistic capacity. The social engagement pattern reveals fundamental nature, most clearly changelings reportedly displaying emotional responses dramatically different from normal infant development, particularly regarding attachment behaviors. Traditional accounts describe distinctive absence of normal bonding markers, including eye contact avoidance, physical affection rejection, and most disturbingly, observation behavior, where substitute appears studying family members with awareness impossible for genuine infant, creating impression of intelligence gathering rather than normal developmental engagement. What elevates the changeling phenomenon beyond conventional supernatural manifestation is its strategic resource extraction methodology. Unlike entities seeking immediate harm, these substitutes implement a long-term parasitic strategy, systematically draining family resources including material provisions, caregiver energy, and most significantly, emotional investment normally directed toward legitimate offspring. This comprehensive extraction creates progressive family deterioration. Financial resources depleted through constant feeding without developmental progress, caregiver health compromised through sleep deprivation from the substitute's reported nocturnal disturbance pattern, and psychological well-being undermined through bonding failure, despite increasing effort investment. Most effective is the reported divisive influence on family structure. The substitute's behavior creating conflict between caregivers regarding appropriate response, often with one parent recognizing unnatural characteristics, while others remain convinced of normal development despite evidence, creating internal discord preventing unified intervention. This family fracturing represents sophisticated social manipulation, transcending mere resource consumption, suggesting strategic methodology designed to prevent collective response that might threaten the substitution arrangement. The developmental stagnation represents the phenomenon's most distinctive characteristic: substitutes, reportedly maintaining infant appearance and capabilities far beyond normal developmental timeline, sometimes extending years or even decades beyond expected maturation points. This arrested development creates progressive recognition discrepancy as age cohort advances, while substitute remains unchanged, eventually forcing community acknowledgement of unnatural situation, regardless of family denial or rationalization attempts. Traditional identification methods focus on revealing true nature rather than mere suspicion confirmation. Primary techniques involve creating situations where maintaining human disguise becomes impossible, particularly through specialized cooking implements, including eggshells or other unusually small containers used for food preparation, allegedly triggering compulsive commentary from substitutes who cannot resist remarking on their inappropriate size despite revealing advanced knowledge through such observation. Physical provocations include specific actions allegedly intolerable to fairy nature, particularly iron proximity, salt application, or exposure to specific herbs including St. John's wort. These substances reportedly causing immediate distress response, revealing inhuman nature through reaction disproportionate to stimulus. Most extreme are traditional recovery methodologies, focusing on forcing substitution reversal rather than merely confirming changeling presence. These techniques demonstrate disturbing escalation pattern, beginning with relatively harmless provocation attempts before progressing to increasingly dangerous interventions, including physical endangerment through fire exposure, submersion, or abandonment in remote locations. These methods reflect desperate historical attempts to force fairy intervention through threatening their placed substitute, creating situation where original child's return becomes preferable to substitute's destruction, though accounts rarely confirm successful recovery through such extreme measures. The psychological impact on families extends beyond conventional grief to a complex emotional landscape combining loss, obligation, and supernatural terror. Unlike straightforward death, where the mourning process follows established cultural patterns, changeling situations create unresolved ambiguity. The original child is neither conclusively dead nor practically recoverable, creating perpetual liminal grief without the possibility of normal resolution. This ambiguity combines with the caretaking obligation toward a creature recognized as inhuman, yet bearing the beloved child's appearance, creating a psychological burden transcending normal parental challenges through its supernatural implications and indefinite duration. Modern interpretations suggest changeling accounts may represent pre-scientific explanations for developmental disorders, including autism spectrum conditions, failure to thrive syndromes, or congenital abnormalities, becoming apparent only after the initial newborn period. This perspective views traditional changeling narratives as a cultural framework, explaining otherwise incomprehensible developmental divergence from expected patterns, particularly regarding social engagement differences, unusual consumption behaviors, and physical development anomalies consistent with now recognized medical conditions. However, contemporary accounts persist despite advanced medical understanding, particularly in rural communities maintaining traditional belief systems and limited healthcare access. These modern narratives demonstrate remarkable consistency with historical documentation while incorporating contemporary elements, substitutes allegedly displaying technological interaction capacity beyond developmental possibility, exhibiting knowledge impossible to acquire through normal means, and most significantly, families reporting objective physical evidence, including surveillance footage showing behavioral changes impossible for genuine infants, creating documentation transcending mere subjective perception or cultural belief perpetuation. So tonight, should your infant's gaze hold awareness beyond possible development? Should their appetite prove insatiable while growth remains stunted despite endless consumption? Remember that vulnerability creates opportunity for entities operating beyond normal perception, and substitution requires only a momentary attention lapse during the critical protection window. For, in the space between birth and secure development, between parental exhaustion and vigilant protection, operates the changeling phenomenon, a substitution strategy targeting society's most vulnerable members while exploiting parental love's blind devotion, replacing human potential with a parasitic simulacrum whose unnatural nature reveals itself through developmental patterns that diverge ever further from normal progression, consuming family resources while the original child serves an unknown purpose in a realm beyond mortal access, remembered only through increasingly distant memories, gradually overshadowed by the growing certainty that the infant in your arms, despite wearing your child's face, represents something fundamentally other than the baby you brought into this world.